Welcome to the More Happiness, Less Suffering podcast. I'm Cayce Howe, Senior Meditation and Dharma Teacher for Inside LA.
And I'm Dr. Monisha Vasa, Psychiatrist. In our little podcasting studio in Orange County, California, we bring wisdom from the couch and the cushion to your real-life questions and struggles. So grab a cup of tea and join us. We're so glad you're here. So welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that frequently comes up for both Cayce as a meditation teacher and myself as a psychiatrist. And that is this question of effort, when to push, when to rest. So we'll be diving a little bit more deeply into that in just a minute. But first, I'm going to read, it's a paragraph, not really a poem, but it's by Mark Nepo, who's one of my favorite authors and poets and spiritual teachers. The name of the book is The One Life We're Given. All our efforts to get close to the world only ready us for the intimate kinships that are always near. This is a form of shared grace. Effort only readies us for grace, as grace can never be planned or willed, only entered. In essence, the journey is to understand and personalize how effort is the teacher and friend who leads us into grace. Effort at its most fundamental level is just that, the commitment to try, to work hard, to give our all, not knowing what the outcome will be. Trying hard and giving our all without knowing where that will lead is also a working definition of faith. Life has taught me that, regardless of what we face, effort and faith will lead us into the larger stream of life that holds us. And being held by the larger stream of life is another way to describe grace.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so like as you mentioned, this comes up a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like when does your practice or anything that you're really going after, it might be an exercise routine or something like this, when do you want to push, and when is the right thing to do, more self-care, and obviously I think one helps the other, but what I see most of all is the judgment piece, that when we do practice like wise resting, then there's a judgment like, oh, I shouldn't be or whatnot, but obviously we need the rest, and then we need to go ahead and push forward. With that said, especially in the meditation world, as of late, there's been a big push on resting and self-care. And obviously we live in a world, not in a world, but on our society in the West here in Southern California, it's like go, and high stress, right? And so people are working long hours, and then let's say then you're supposed to fit in self-care too, and it becomes another to-do list.
Yes.
Right? So we're going to go work, and don't forget to meditate, and don't forget to eat right, and don't forget to prepare your meals, and don't forget to get 8 hours of sleep, and don't forget to
journal.
and don't forget to journal and
work out. Yep.
Yeah, and everything, right? And so we need that self-care part. But one thing that I do want to say is that yes, and meditation is difficult, and it takes a lot of discipline. Working out takes a lot of discipline. And if you're going to progress, you need to balance that out. And I have a little story from Joseph Goldstein, but I wanted to see if you wanted to.
Well, I just actually had a question about something that you brought up, which is, what you mentioned, that in the meditation community, there's more value being placed on rest. I think you said wise rest, maybe is the term that you used. I'm curious to know sort of in what form, like what that looks like in the meditation community when rest is encouraged or being valued. What does that look like operationally?
Well, actually, I think operationally it looks a lot like the instruction for practice, which is non-judgment. because that, and I mentioned that where the pinch is, it's not so much this resting or pushing. It's this judgment that comes when we can't anymore. And so this whole subject matter of self-care, I would say, more than anything, like this resting would be self-care. And self-care actually is in there with the meditation practice as well. In other words, we can't just push, and then expect to have this infinite practice where we're always motivated to meditate and all of that stuff. What happens if there's not motivation, and sometimes you really need to take a nap and just say, I'm just done.
Right.
And it's okay if you miss a meditation, or I like to say, don't miss a meditation, just do one breath, instead of just missing it. And then think that you kicked ass. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. Like, you just did one breath. It's not like, oh, I didn't do my 45 minutes that I wanted to do. It's like, no, I did my minute.
Yes.
I did my breath.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah, that's good enough.
And
sometimes.
And that builds resilience. If we break ourselves down, like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and then we break ourselves down, then what?
You're right.
It's all about longevity of the practice.
The sustainability.
I tell people, I don't care if you're meditating 45 minutes a day now. I want you to be meditating at least 5-10 minutes 5 years from now. Like, having that continuity with your practice.
Right. The consistency
is really important.
I think that comes up a lot with, for me, I think about, some of the residents that I work with doing this physician health work. Residents obviously have this crazy intense schedule and oftentimes have, kind of type A personality traits and are used to really kind of going all or none, really pushing themselves. And it's challenging because that mindset has gotten them to where they are in many ways, right? So there's been a reward for that type of effort and pushing and drive, which the reward has been, the appearance of success. I've gotten to residency, I've made it to becoming a doctor. So we learn that type of behavior maybe starts to feel like a positive thing. Like, if I work my ass off, I'm going to get to where I want to go. But what we find with these residents over time, when they're hit with stress and they're hit with these crazy work hours and these intense patient situations, is that oftentimes that same mindset no longer is working, and they hit burnout and depression and anxiety. And so oftentimes when we talk about the need to rest or the need to back off a little bit or to take a break, oftentimes what we're talking about is kind of all or nothing thinking and also small steps. Like, these are the two themes that often come up. It's like, okay, you need to take care of yourself. You might not be able to sleep 8 hours tonight, but can you take a 20-minute nap to catch up on some rest? Or you may not be able to hit the gym tomorrow for 2 hours, but can you go for a walk for 20 minutes? Like, where is that balance between the effort and the surrender to what your body needs? So kind of breaking down that all or nothing thinking, I think sometimes can be helpful. And also just seeing that, there's sometimes very small steps that we can take. We don't need to go all the way for the marathon. We can just do a little bit, and that's what you're saying about the meditation practice. Like, even if we don't do 45 minutes, we can do 5 minutes every day, or we can do even less than that, one conscious breath. But it's a practice, it's a practice to find that balance for yourself because, as you said earlier, when are we slipping into maybe some laziness or maybe not trying as hard as we could, and we're always trying to gauge that for ourselves.
Yeah. I like to use a statement for myself is just move towards, just move towards it. Like, oh, I can't accomplish this whole thing and I have resistance. I'm just going to start. I'm going to move towards. And what gives me energy is actually doing it. The motivation doesn't come before for me. It's like I start doing something and then it ramps up from there, right? Yeah, Joseph Goldstein tells a cool story, and this is kind of looking at the art and science of meditation. There is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment is right effort, right? And this is a very, very important step in our practice. Is this right effort? And he tells a story of being in India. I believe he was with Goenka, and I don't think it was India. And he was with Goenka, and they started at 5 a.m. in the morning. And he was going to the 5 a.m. sit, but he was too tired to actually sit through it. So he would just go there, try to get there actually a little early so he could find a place by the wall and find a seat by the wall, and then he would sit and go to sleep. He would be like 5:10, he'd be asleep. And so he did this day after day. And then his mind, which is like the hindrance of doubt, his mind said, you shouldn't even go to 5 a.m. Skip that one, have breakfast, go to the second sit, and you're awake and you're good, right? This is tricky. So on one hand, you could say it'll self-care, right? On one hand. The other hand, is discipline, and which one, should he choose? And he said, I'm actually having more effort by going and sitting and trying, even if it's for a minute. Even if I sit down for a minute before I fall asleep, I'm doing more than skipping it altogether.
Right.
I'm going to keep going. So he kept going, and day by day, he sat longer and longer until he was sitting through that whole first session. And for the rest of the retreat, it was not a problem. A good example of how to really watch the mind.
Yeah.
He didn't necessarily need to sleep more. Again, he was on retreat. Pretty low consequence if you're tired or whatnot, not in regular life and these types of things. So really just pay attention to the mind. And I think it goes back to compassion. If we're coming from a place of love and compassion for self and others, that's going to be a much easier way to gauge success. Because you mentioned that this other gauge of like, I'm going to go to this and this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. I want to go over here. If I want to move towards more compassion, more kindness for myself or others, what's the most compassionate thing to do?
Yeah.
And sometimes the most compassionate thing to do for our own psyche overall is to reach liberation.
Right.
That's the most compassionate thing we could do.
Yeah.
And sometimes reaching liberation from our own suffering, our own mind, that takes discipline. So in that way, he's like, ultimately, yeah, my body might be sleepy, but I'm suffering overall.
Right.
And it takes to overthrow those habits of delusion. It is going to take some energy.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I find that often comes up, in my world, like sometimes with my patients, for example. I think about some of my patients who struggle with addiction, and they're struggling, they're having a hard time, maybe they're having a bad day, or they're struggling with some depression or anxiety. And what feels like the kindest thing in a given moment might be to reach for a drink or to, but when you kind of go beneath that and you ask, well, is that really the kindest thing that you could do for yourself in that moment? I know that feels like the path of least resistance. I know that there's the power of addiction or habit behind that. But if you're actually asking yourself, what is the most compassionate thing for myself and others? Is that really what it is? And so sometimes I think we do have to really ask ourselves that question, because sometimes I think there might be an answer that initially appears, but really is kind of a false answer in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it goes back to what is my motivation? What am I moving towards? And from that place, how is that decision being made? Because that could really inform our decision one way or the other with with what is our intention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, like it always goes back, obviously, to like, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't get this or that, I don't need to kill myself.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Right.
As long as we're eating and
right.
it's not a matter
our basic needs are met.
Yeah,
yes.
it's not a matter
yeah.
of survival. But a lot of these things that we push for are more ego driven and this and that. And so we have to just wait it out. And I guess the other thing that I will say is that there are times, let's say, for yourself, med school or things like this, that are really big pushes and they're extreme.
Yeah.
They are extreme and you're just not going to get around it.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, it could lead, there's going to be times when there's more balance, to balance that out.
Mm-hmm.
So there is going to be extreme, like, whether it be a retreat when you're doing these very intense, Vajrayana visualization practices, it's like quite intense or something like that. And there's a time and a place for that because on the other side of it is a goal that you really want, or you can have more balance later or something like that.
Right. Yeah, sometimes I think just knowing that in the bigger picture there's going to be a balance, then in the moment you can sort of push yourself, perhaps a little bit more than you otherwise would, knowing that, okay, I understand, again, the intention and the reason for which I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Where it's leading me is meaningful enough to me for me to undergo this, you know.
And it's actually fun. They talk about good stress. So athletes or something that they're training, and it's just they feel so alive and so amazing. Or musicians or entertainers, people that are living their passions, and they can run off of that passion. And they've done these studies, and it's not stressful for them in the same way.
Yeah. I wouldn't put med school in that same category. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
It's just to have balance when we're looking at it. It's not all just one view of like, we got to do it just like this. But I think for me, it goes back to overall in life. What's my intention? Compassion for myself and others.
Right.
Move into some kindness, which is the key of perseverance and strength. Because if we go around judging each and every moment and every failure, it's not going to lead to resilience. It's like, it's interesting how kindness and love and gentleness and tenderness a lot of times is put in the realm of weakness. And it's the only thing that keeps us in the long run resilient. You see people who don't have it and try to stuff it, and then later in life that opens up again. But
I find it's probably, at least for myself, one of the sort of, I guess, the closest, what's the word? If I try to really purify my motivation, right, it comes down to that at the end of the day, so it's like, that's, the desire to, be kind, be compassionate, love, serve, it's like, it could be seen as weakness, but it's also the only thing that keeps me doing everything that I'm doing day in and day out. It's like, that's where my motivation, that's what defines my motivation.
And what I love about it, about service and offering kindness to others and this and that, is that it's doable. It's achievable. I think like I could sit on the 405 freeway and give kindness to others energetically. And then I can go somewhere and just be kind to opening the door for somebody or smiling at a restaurant or anything like that, and I could feel a sense of like, oh, I'm on purpose today. And it doesn't matter where you are; you could be kind anywhere in whatever profession or whatnot.
Correct.
You could help each other out. And if not, you could even do it as a meditation, obviously, energetically, without even being with anybody physically. So it is attainable all the time. Feel a sense of success.
Yes, absolutely.
So. All right, cool. So I think we'll move into a little meditation. And so as we say, if you are driving, listening to to this podcast, you will not be meditating with us in the same way. Keep your eyes open on the road, all that good stuff. But you could hear and listen and take it in verbally. And if not, allowing your eyes to close. And remember, there's ultimately nowhere to go, nothing to do. You already are what you're seeking. And even knowing that, it takes a little bit of effort to become effortless. And so notice the effort that it takes simply to be aware. To be aware that you are alive and breathing. Notice that there is a little bit of effort to wake up when the mind drifts away. And there might be a little bit more effort to sustain the wakefulness in this moment. In this moment. In this moment. And notice that you may leave awareness, but awareness never leaves you. And using as little energy, as little effort as possible to stay with what is. Sitting, breathing, being. And wishing this stillness, wishing this opportunity for all beings everywhere to find the effortless state where they already are calm and at ease. May all beings everywhere without exception, may they be happy, may they be free from suffering.